My name is Tad. I work for a company here in Austin called NarrativeDx. We help hospitals improve their patient experience by looking at the comments and the feedback that patients give to hospitals. We pull out little pieces of advice and improvement from those comments and tell the hospitals how they can improve their patient experience. So that's what my company does. I'm pretty new to Austin. I moved here last June from Philadelphia. So I love it here. This is my first South by Southwest too, so it's a little crazy, but it's pretty fun. All right, I'll just get started. I'm talking today about sentiment analysis of healthcare experience comments, particularly comments left online. Just with a show of hands, how many of you here are familiar with sentiment analysis? Awesome. Okay, so this is going to go really well or really poorly. Okay, so, oh. Can I blame Ubuntu? How long can I blame Ubuntu without you guys giving up on me? Okay, yeah, I'll try to touch it. All right, so of those that heard about sentiment analysis, can you put your hands back up for me? Keep your hand up if you can think of 2 different types of sentiment analysis. 3 different types, 4 different types. Okay, what are the 4 different types, maybe just a couple that you're thinking of, sentiment analysis?
You do context free, just positive, negative, neutral for a document.
Okay.
You do target level stuff, right? So specifically with respect to, I love the Ford Mustang and I hate the Chevy Camaro. Right?
Okay.
So you want to be able to tease those apart. There's maybe emotion, sometimes consider emotion.
Emotion's good, yeah.
And gosh, the other one I had lost.
That's all right. So there are different types of sentiment analysis. And what I'm hoping to talk about today is that there are as many different types of sentiment analysis as there are domains. And my overarching point of this talk, and it's going to be interactive, is basically that for every domain you have, whether it's products, whether it's a customer experience, whether it's a consumable, maybe a going out to eat where you ate food, but it's also about the experience, whether it's hospital care, where you don't want to be there, right? Like nobody wants to be in a hospital, they just want to feel good. This all starts and dates back to predicting the semantic orientation of adjectives, and also this key definition here. The semantic orientation or polarity of a word indicates the direction the word deviates from the norm of its semantic group or lexical field. So what does that mean? Basically, it's the difference here in the second bullet point. It's the difference between something that is simple and something that is simplistic. So instructions on how to build furniture can be simple, but a user experience that's simplistic might be unfulfilling and undesirable. The analysis, when we do sentiment analysis, and hopefully if those of you that are developers or data scientists in the room, hopefully this talk and what I present to you gives you the courage to go out there and assert your expertise in a very specific domain of sentiment analysis, where at its core, the semantic orientation tries to determine whether or not the language describes something desirable. My point being that there's not this objective, positive, or negative concepts out there. It's domain specific. So I'm going to give you guys some examples of this, and I really apologize for all the text up here at the beginning. And then the conclusion being that sentiment analysis is the process by which we determine the semantic orientation of the text. And when I talk about semantic orientation, I just mean in the real world, what's going on? So there's a language that we use to communicate, and there's a language that we use to leave product reviews. Like my washing machine showed up and it didn't work, it was broken. That's an unmet expectation that I have, that washing machines that I buy are going to work when they arrive. So in the real world, the orientation was that the washing machine should have worked and it didn't. there are a couple modern applications of sentiment analysis, one of them being this concept of thumbs up or thumbs down in online text reviews. I see some nods in the back, all right. The classification of a review is predicted by the average semantic orientation of the phrases in the review. And I keep saying semantic orientation, and it's a little wordy, but the point being that the meaning the language has is depending on what's going on in the real world. And I'll tie this all back into healthcare and how we use it at NarrativeDx to improve healthcare experience. Frequently, you think there's the concept of sentiment analysis in online reviews for automobiles, banks, movies, transactions. Some expectations for automobiles might not be the same as they are for banks, a banking experience, or movies. What do you enjoy when you go to watch a movie? It's more of an experience that you have. There's also this concept of mining and summarizing customer reviews. So products, again, the washing machine example, did it work? Did it get your clothes clean? Did it make too much noise? How long did it work for? These are all expectations that we have about products, but it's very domain specific. And also another paper extracting product reviews online. So at the top level, when I do sentiment analysis, and I think this is a sound approach, is that when you look at a comment that was left about a product, you want to know whether or not that experience was desirable or undesirable. At the end of the day, that's thumbs up or thumbs down. Was the experience or the description of this product that they had, was it good, thumbs up, or was it bad, thumbs down? Of course, there's neutrality. Sometimes they're just statements of fact. They're not really, they can't really be attributed to any desirability of the product or the way that it functioned. It's just kind of, my washing machine arrived yesterday. Well, that's just a statement of fact, unless there's other contextual information that it should have arrived 2 weeks ago. So if the second sentence was, but it should have arrived last month, then the first sentence is now negative, right? It arrived yesterday, which we thought was good, but then the second sentence, the contextual information was that it should have arrived 2 months ago. So the first sentence becomes negative, thumbs down. So common product expectations are that the product itself doesn't arrive broken, is that it works as advertised. Specific product expectations, consumables aren't like eaten already, like your food doesn't arrive with a big bite out of it. And you think like I'm giving you like some ridiculous examples, but once you read like online reviews of stuff, they just come up with off-the-wall things, especially in healthcare experience. And the product doesn't hurt you is another one. This is another inconsistency in healthcare comments people leave, is that they talk about being in pain a lot. And in a normal application, if you go to a restaurant and you talk about being in pain, then it's really bad, right? That's a really undesirable thing to have happen. So why should we care? Sentiment analysis is one of the more basic natural language processing tasks that I can think of. And using supervised methodology, there's the concept of star ratings with the hotels and the talk earlier, 1 through 5 stars. And if you train your machine learning models on those 1 through 5 stars, you can get very good predictive accuracy for 1 through 5 stars. Given a comment or a review, is this a 1-star review? Is it a 5-star review? 5-star review is great. 1-star review is bad. So why do we need to know about the semantic orientation, and why do we care about that? Does anyone have an idea of why we should care about a more specific analysis than basically, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down? Yeah.
Sometimes the pieces do not sum up to the whole part. So for example, in a movie, I might like a certain actor's role as such, so I might love him, but as a whole, I would not like the movie. So
absolutely.
So some of the parts is not equal to that.
Absolutely. So the pieces of the pieces don't add up to the whole, maybe the contextual information, additional sentences. The thing I was thinking of is you care about the semantic orientation if you care about fixing the problem. So if you need something more specific than it was good or it was bad, say you had an Oracle sentiment analysis filter that just told you with 100% accuracy whether your product review was great or it was bad. That's cool, but then what do you do about the bad ones? You need a more detailed analysis for it if you're going to fix the problem. So correct semantic sentiment interpretation is required for follow-up. What's going on in the real world? In order to address the problem and fix it, you have to know what's going on in the sentence.
It's also for consumers, like in the data affinity kind of world where you'd want to understand something about products and you'd want to understand what was the sentiment towards different aspects of the product. So that's another
Absolutely.
kind of use case for understanding the text.
Absolutely. What parts of it went wrong? So I went online and found some funny products on Amazon. For example, this like dashboard car thing. Obvious design flaws. It's a real thing. It's this awesome bit of kit changed my life. The extra hours of work I could get in whilst driving on the freeway has made me so much more productive. Wow. Another product I found online. I think this is a bit of a gag joke, but I purchased this product 4.7 billion years ago when I opened it. Haha, right? Again, so it's a joke, but unmet expectations. They ordered the product. They expected it to be full. It was empty. Okay, so now we're going to play a little game. It's called Good Healthcare Review or Bad Other Review. Upon walking into the ER, my dad was taken right away to begin testing since it was an emergent situation. Is this a good healthcare review or a bad other review? Good healthcare review, right? I didn't die. Good healthcare review or a bad other review? It's a bad other review. This was a hotel review about going to this terrible hotel in Florida, and they left this long, and it's funny because the review site made you say something positive about the hotel, but the reviewer clearly had nothing good to say about it except that they didn't die. Food was okay, pretty bland. Good healthcare review or bad other review? It is a good healthcare review because it was hospital food. Good meals, service, price at the restaurant, valet parking. Good healthcare review or bad other review? It was a good hotel. Oh, I'm sorry, there was a third option that I didn't tell you guys about. Valet, because our truck was too big to fit in a lot, and the valet workers immediately hit us up for tip money for taking care of us. What the heck? So trick question, it's a bad hospital review. Unfortunately, most of the scathing reviews. So there's this thing where companies can go on and contest reviews, and transparency is an issue in the healthcare industry. A lot of hospitals do have transparency initiatives where they promise you that they will publish all comments left. No matter how bad or how scathing a review of your doctor is, they will publish that. But online, I tried to go on and find reviews of restaurants about them being made sick and stuff, and it wasn't really there. So it's difficult to find like really tragic situations, except I deal with them all day because I try to help hospitals improve tragic situations. Healthcare experience sentiment problem space. So what can go wrong in the healthcare experience? It's not about clinical effectiveness. It's not about whether or not you felt well. It's also not about whether or not you felt better after leaving the hospital or after seeing your doctor. the patient's experience of receiving healthcare services, it might be about what things that are clinically relevant, but patient experience, I try to think of it in terms of customer service and experience for healthcare. So did your doctor listen to you? Did your doctor explain things in a way that you could understand? Did your nurse treat you with courtesy and respect? These are things that the patient is aware of and actually impact healthcare. The desirability, so at the beginning of the talk, I was mentioning how the comment or the review online, if you're left with the impression that, yeah, that's a desirable experience, then it's a positive sentiment. If you're left with the impression that it's a negative experience, undesirable, then it's a negative sentiment. So in terms of healthcare, would you recommend the hospital or not is a factor in sentiment. Cleanliness, was the hospital clean? And dignity and respect, I mentioned that earlier. Did the patient feel like they were being treated with dignity and respect? Did the patient feel listened to? So these are all things where the patient is aware of them, and the hospital and the practitioners have already committed to doing these things well. So I'll talk a little bit later in the drama surrounding the patient experience movement in healthcare, because there is some drama around it. There is some kickback and some resistance from groups within the healthcare experience where they don't like being criticized. They feel like the clinical outcomes are the final and the end result. So here's some data. This is from ZocDoc.com. It's been stripped for names. Dr. Name is quite friendly, and so was his receptionist. Overall, a pleasant experience. However, I really didn't feel like my medical issues were attended to. So these are key words and phrases you can look for or that commonly pop up in healthcare experience, is that they didn't really feel like they were being cared for, and they didn't really feel like their needs were being taken into account. Dr. Name wasn't really listening. They had to repeat several things that I had already said, and his answers were quite generic and unconvincing. So these are key words: generic, unconvincing. Unconvincing is a word that might be brought up when someone's talking about an actor in a movie, that sort of a thing. I went to the ER. The check-in process was relatively seamless. This is something that is talked about a lot in healthcare, is how is the process of getting admitted when you're not feeling well. It's super important that you're admitted quickly and as seamlessly as possible. A 15-minute or so wait times in healthcare are very widely in emergency room situations. You can wait for hours and hours just to be admitted. There's also wait times that are referenced with respect to how long it took to get be seen by a specialist. Crying, someone, I don't think crying, very rarely is someone mentioned crying in a healthcare experience, and it's a good thing. So pretty much any time you see someone mention crying, it's probably a bad thing. Oh gosh, this is depressing. Why did I? Sorry, guys. So some more data about online comments. Nurse name was very condescending and judgmental. They'd just given my daughter a heavy dose of medication. Very stern and condescending voice. So the whole purpose of improving the healthcare experience is really making people feel like they're cared for and that their needs are being taken into consideration. Okay, so the drama, basically I mentioned early that there is some kickback from care providers in the healthcare field surrounding whether or not the patient's interpretation of their care is even valid. Does improved patient experience actually improve clinical outcomes? It does. Does improved patient experience make people healthier? It does, because if someone is thinking of going to the doctor and they're scared of their doctor and they don't go to their doctor, that's worse than like a good outcome of some sort. So, or a bad outcome for not going to the doctor. There's also the controversy around whether or not people should be able to review their doctors at all. A while back, there were copyright claims for doctors where you couldn't actually use the doctor's name in your review because they were having their patients sign forms that gave away their right to even reference the doctor at all. So I think there is evidence for and against whether or not improving patient experience actually improves clinical outcomes. My biggest point at the end of the day when I do sentiment analysis on these healthcare experience comments, trying to tell the doctors whether or not they did a good job or a poor job, is that all the analysis that I do and that we do at NarrativeDx is things that doctors have already committed to doing and things that hospitals have already said they want to do. They want their patients to be happy. They want their patients to feel listened to. They want their patients to feel like their doctors are explaining things well. A big issue in compliance of medication is understanding how your doctor told you to take the medication and what it was for. If someone leaves the hospital and they don't understand like what each medication is for, then they probably aren't even going to take the medication or take it reliably. So that's something else in those comments. Okay, and sources if you guys are interested in the sentiment analysis, but that's all I prepared. And questions?
Yeah, there's an interesting parallel. So those of us who do the professing thing and teach students, we get student evaluations. And, right, this is sort of a common thing in universities these days. Everybody says, "Well, I like this course, 5 out of, whatever, 5 stars," or "I like the professor, whatever, out of 5 stars." And there's recent work that shows that there actually are anti-correlations between the scores that the professor gives and the outcomes of the students on future courses. In other words, as a professor, you can get high scores by making your course easier, right? And so there are concerns in academia around that. Now, you get student comments, and those can be really valuable for thinking about what aspects can be improved in the course. But overall, if there's some kind of metric tied to a doctor's pay or something like that, you could end up in similar kinds of situations. Is that
totally? Yeah, it's so there is some publications out there. I'll just let it go black. There is some evidence out there that doctors who are trying to make their patients happier have worse clinical outcomes. And there was actually a study that was halted because the doctors weren't telling their patients things they needed to tell them. Here's an example. If someone is overweight and their doctor tells them they might need to exercise more, it might make the patient unhappy. So the doctors were not telling their patients that, and it was harming the patient's health. So at the end of the day, I think what I would say in response to that is we're not telling the doctors about anything they haven't already committed to doing. We're not saying you need to make your patients feel like they're superhuman and never get sick and nothing is ever wrong with them. At NarrativeDx, the goal is to help the hospital do the things it has already committed to doing by analyzing the patient's feedback and the specific language that the patients are using to bring things bring things up about the care itself. Yeah?
So you showed some examples like from Yelp and these online kind of review places. Do you try to, when you actually are looking at this, do you try to do some kind of more broader sampling than just like a review site? Because it seems like the review sites, especially for medical care, are going to be very biased. Because you have people that are like drug-seeking patients that are trying to get Vicodin and so forth, and they'll get very mad and say,
absolutely,
"Oh, the doctor was terrible to me," when the doctor was really doing the right thing by not giving them the drugs they were looking for.
Right. So the government mandates a survey called CAHPS, CAHP. For hospitals, it's the HCAHPS. It's clinicians and hospital experience. I knew it at some point in time, but it's escaping me now. Anyway, there are a handful of surveys, And at the end of the surveys, the patients can leave comments about their care. Specifically, you know that the patient went to that hospital. Online, there's very little verification that the patient was a patient at the hospital or was talking to the doctor. And you can leave those comments. They're so much more informative and so much more helpful than anything that's posted online. The stuff that's online tends to be diatribes. It tends to be heavily biased towards negative comments, people that were very upset. And it's also only weakly statistically correlated in terms of Twitter, which was a recent paper that came out, that negative tweets were only barely statistically relevant and correlated to negative care. So even in the case of Twitter, you can't rely on that as a reliable data source. Yeah?
Something on that survey that you mentioned, how about that plays with the HIPAA law? Because
right.
Free open the privacy and all that.
Absolutely. NarrativeDx is completely HIPAA compliant.
I mean, yeah, that's fine, right? And that's because public domain.
Right, it's public.
But what about other surveys that you mentioned, which are pretty much the patient leaves the survey end of its, the survey that is chat survey, what you mentioned.
Right, so
wouldn't that be like, mining that would be against you?
No, there's, when we're working with the hospital, as long as we maintain the stringent and security protocols in place for the patient's privacy, PHI, personal health information that comes from the hospital, as long as we maintain the custody and the security, there's no break in HIPAA. Yeah.
Have you looked at doing sentiment analysis on short text, like tweets? Because one thing we find is, once you get a paragraph, there's an overall tone, and sort of bag of word models, just even linear ones, will actually get really spot on that. You get stuff that is kind of like snippet size. All of a sudden, the relationship between the word matters. There may be one or two sentiment words in there, and it really matters which of the words in the sentence the good goes with, or whether there's a negation in the sentence, or if there's a double negation in the sentence.
Yeah, absolutely. So the paragraphs themselves can have sentiment. We identify comments on the phrase level. So and the reason we do that is because if you're going to improve or fix something that went wrong, you can't fix an entire paragraph with one Band-Aid. So we look at every sentence and we say what went wrong or right in the sentence, what can the hospital continue doing well, and what can it do better?
Right, but that's kind of still in context. You have the rest of the paragraph.
You do, right.
But I'm just talking about when you just have the sentence.
The tweet, like the tweets themselves,
yeah.
like a tweet. Yeah, so the paper I was referencing, I forget who wrote it, but they did an analysis of tweets and sentiment on the tweets. It was accurate in its predictive power, but it wasn't correlated to clinical outcomes.
That's interesting. Do you have a reference for that paper?
I don't right now. You can sure Google Scholar, Twitter, healthcare experience.
I usually found things that were, once you get down to the Twitter level, most things just break down.
It will. I don't think it's enough in the example I gave you where the first sentence could be negative or positive and then the second sentence completely screws it up. There's just, it's difficult, not impossible.
That's been our experience too. To do sentiment analysis on Twitter content is very difficult and extremely difficult if you don't look at emoticons.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
You mentioned that most of the analysis that you did were kind of aligned with the healthcare providers' goals. Did you ever come across somewhere they were not aligned with? I mean, what's the point of NarrativeDx if they say like, hey, you should improve this, but they've already thought of that?
Yeah, we'll tell hospitals they need better parking situation, and the hospital says, we already know that. Our response is, well, we've given you a bunch of evidence to support that decision. As where before it may have been just an empirical parking sucks at all hospitals, we now show you, here's all the patients that left all these comments, and that's why they think the parking is bad. Great, okay, thank you.